Hey, what's up, everyone? Jason Bennett, Pop Code HQ, with another edition of Pants Optional. It's our Zoom interview segment where we chat with comic book creators and talk about their latest projects and get the lowdown, but from the waist up. Today, I'm rejoined by recurring guest, Ringo Award-winning creator Rylend Grant, who has a new project coming out through SourcePoint Press Publishing entitled Suicide Jockeys. Tokusatsu for the contemporary action movie fan. It's Voltron meets Fast and the Furious with an extra dollop of heart and soul, and it releases August 25th in comic shops and online retailers. Please welcome to the show, Rylend Grant. Rylend, welcome back.
How you doing? That was I was worried about pitching the book as we were off camera, and you just did a great job. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, when you see all the questions that I have, I had to pack that in there because we got to keep moving. There's a lot to cover here.
Rock and roll. I appreciate it.
Beautiful first book. Thank you for sharing the review copy with me. In this first explosive issue, you're really tackling quite a bit. You've always been gifted at delivering an intense, hearty first issue, always giving readers immense value for their buck. But this debut certainly follows suit, of course, but you have a larger ensemble with which to play with, a group of people known as the Cognizant to explore this tokusatsu experience throughout, and time travel. Let's get to know the players of your new series. So just who are the Suicide Jockeys? What can you share about their leader, Denver Wallace, his nemesis, the opportunistic entrepreneur Rory Danforth, and the billionaire investor Sunil Dalal?
Yeah, it's a lot of characters you laid out. It's a big world. There are a lot of characters. You're kind of introduced to it at breakneck speed, breakneck pace. I think it's a good thing. There's a lot to hold on to. This thing kind of there are two major influences in it in terms of kind of how characters are presented and how the world is. Some of my favorite films ever are the early Michael Bay films. I'm talking about Armageddon and The Rock. There are kind of like spiritual cousins of those movies, like Con Air, and then I think Tony Scott always did this really well with his movies too. If you talk about Enemy of the State and Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Days of Thunder and Man on Fire, and you get a lot of characters. Everybody is very memorable, even if they have 2 minutes of screen time. They pack a lot of punch. They hit you right in the face. There's a quirk. There's a line that you remember immediately. It's amazing. You think about those films. You think back to Con Air or The Rock or something like that. And sometimes these characters, they become iconic. They had 3 minutes of screen time, but they become so beloved like 20 years later, 30 years later, right?
They've left that lasting impression.
Yeah, exactly. And so managing it is like that. I don't want throwaway characters. I never want to write a script and say like, police officer number 3 or, angry man or anything like that. It's like each character is fully formed. The point is that these guys pop off the page, and gals, and hopefully that's the case. And I think that's the case with this thing. The other major influence, this is ultimately, it is an action joint. It is a tokusatsu joint. It is, Fast and the Furious, but it really is, I guess Fast and the Furious does this, but it's about a family, and it's about, the families we make for ourselves. Family isn't always your blood, right? It's who's there for you. And I think we all hit this point in our lives where we move away from home, and maybe you had trouble with your actual family or something like that. Some of us have had that, some of us haven't, and you create this new family. And sometimes that's the people you're romantically involved with, but sometimes it's the people you work with and the people that you are responsible for one reason or another. I think a film that does that really well is Boogie Nights. You know,
Okay.
I mean, that was a family in the porn industry, and it's just such an interesting character study. And I was trying to do the same thing, kind of, with a group of kind of like monster fighting pirates, who are the suicide jockeys. There's a definition page. It's the first thing you see when you open the comic, and it defines suicide jockeys, and it says, uh, what does it say? A poor, usually drunken, almost certainly mentally ill crew of monster fighting, tank and aircraft piloting suckers. Um, so that's what they are. They are, for better or for worse, the only thing standing between us and annihilation by kaiju. So yeah. And Denver Wallace is, their leader, their kind of father figure. He's kind of a latter day Bruce Willis, and he is woefully flawed human being. And you hate him for a number of reasons, but you love him also. And I think in the end, you realize that deep down, flawed as he is, he cares deeply for everyone, in his charge, and he cares deeply for the world. And as flawed as that is, and he'll do anything and everything for you. You know.
Wow. Wow. And in reading the first issue, I love seeing Denver appearing at a convention and witnessing, the event from his viewpoint with his, where his head's at. I was curious, is there anything in those scenes that were drawn from actual experiences that you've seen or heard at cons? Because there is some
Yeah.
there that that struck a chord that that didn't seem too far off.
Yeah, well, this is a theme that runs through a lot of my comics, is that this deals with the idea of fame and notoriety. It's something that I've always. It's the most obvious thing in the world to me whenever you're dealing with any of these things, is that if there were superheroes, if there were people that climbed into like tanks and aircraft, if there was a Voltron team that saved the world over and over again, they would be massive celebrities, particularly now. You know what I'm saying? I feel like there's not enough of media that really kind of deals with that. You know what I'm saying? It's like look at how famous the fucking Kardashians are, and they do nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If
Right.
you regularly save the world, you would be this massive celebrity, and it would corrupt you. And we saw a bit of that in ABERRANT with Lance Cordry, obviously, and then we explored it again, and BANJAX, mostly with Abel Raines, with Gyro. And we're doing that again here to a certain degree. I mean, I think it's always been the beauty of all my books, but I sort of double down and triple down on it here, where I will do absolutely anything. I'm committed to telling the story in an unconventional way, and so a lot of issue 2 is spent watching this character, Rory Danforth, watching his kind of inane Kardashian like reality show. That's maybe like a third of issue 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm realizing now that I didn't send that to you, and maybe I should have. But the idea is, so you have this group of people, and so what does this notoriety do to all of them? And they all handle it in different sort of ways. And Rory is the one who kind of becomes the megastar, but he becomes Kim Kardashian to a certain degree. He's like a social media star and a reality TV star, and he's not a hero anymore, right? Denver kind of goes, basically what happens is 10 years before the book starts, and we see there's this catastrophic event that breaks the team up, right? And so when we start, we see them 10 years later, and the first issue is really about somebody coming to them and saying, hey, this thing that went wrong 10 years ago, you guys can write it now. You need to come back together. And so it's about, and it's about that. But we meet everybody 10 years later, and we're dealing with the fallout, and Rory has become this big reality TV star, but Denver has really washed out, and he's on the convention circuit, and he's gone the way of like, an old washed up TV star. I mean, the direct comparisons in the book are Eric Estrada from Chips or Lou Ferrigno from The Incredible Hulk. He's basically in an autograph alley at a con, sitting between the two of these guys, signing autographs for cretins and trying to, get them to buy T-shirts and stuff like that. So yes, that's a very long-winded way of saying, I have, for the last 3 or 4 years done a lot of cons, and slowly but surely, I have become, you know, this much famous or notable or whatever. I have fans, and so it's interesting interacting with all of them, and then also, like, all of my friends now are comic creators, and some of whom are much more famous and noteworthy than I am, and seeing how they deal with that, and so yeah, all of that kind of gets poured into this. All of these things are about my life experience, and it's about me kind of getting my demons and my fears and my hopes in a room and beating the shit out of them, right? And so yeah, a lot of that gets infused. And so yeah, we start out at a convention where where people are excited to meet these guys, so that's funny.
Yeah, no, it definitely made me think to, pay a little more respect to the people appearing at these cons, man. You don't know what what they're dealing with, because yeah, Denver really gets into it. I really love seeing the suicide jockeys combine their vehicles to create Mama, just this badass, fear-inducing behemoth. It's awesome. The thing is dope.
Yep.
And of course, it wouldn't be a Rylend Grant series without 80s nods throughout. So everything you've come to love from Grant and his writing, and definitely much more is in this first issue. You've teamed up once again with the creative team from the Ringo Award-winning series ABERRANT, who also worked on your successful Kickstarter campaign for the Peacekeepers, Davi Leon Diaz, Juan Joko Troiano, and HDE. How did you come to reteam with these creators to produce the visuals for your story?
Yeah, and I should mention producer RJ Hendricks too, who kind of has helped shepherd the
From
project
Rising
along. And
Spirit Entertainment. Yes, I know.
yeah, and he was involved in Aberrant also, and he's a big help and a big creative influence. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you get a team that works, and obviously Aberrant was a lot of fun to do, and it was really well received. And so when you have a team like that, it's very easy to kind of run them back out and keep them working. So I mean, that's my philosophy in all this stuff. You have your hooks in somebody, and it's going well, just keep them working. So as soon as uh as soon as Davi's done with something, I just try to get him another script. And it's very easy just to then ship that to a Juan afterwards. And you know um it takes so long to develop like a shorthand with somebody,
Mhm.
um and it's a little easier with artists, but there's a hump to get over. Colorists it's really difficult. Not difficult, but it just takes a lot of work to get into a rhythm with the colorist. I mean, there are things that you like, and there are things that they like, and syncing up and
Right.
developing that shorthand can take a couple of issues.
So
And
is it a
so
lot of back and forth in trying to nail down that look?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's just you have to find your shared style. And so with the Juan, we have it. I can give a Juan a page and be like,
Right.
we have a couple of looks that we go to. We have tricks up our sleeve. We have all of these things, and so I can just say to a Juan, give me the sunset look, and with a lens flare, and with our standard lens flare, and panel 3,
Right.
and and he just knocks it out. And I don't have to tell him I don't like white backgrounds. I don't have to tell him that, oh well, I'd rather you do this than this. I'm usually not a big fan of pink. I don't want my characters doing this or that, and he just knows it all. You know what I'm saying? And so it just cuts everything down. And so I mean, also, he does great work in general, but it's just, I can do a book with a Juan in about half the time that I can do with a new colorist. So that ends up being a big deal. And then HD is he's a machine. He's awesome. He's professional. Ringo Award nominated, obviously, and he letters all my books. And so as long as he has time, when and HDE deals with a lot of clients, and I don't think he has to train his clients too. You know what I'm saying? There's
Sure.
there are ways to make a letterer's life a lot easier. And he has me trained pretty well right now, and he knows that I pay immediately, that I pay on time. He doesn't have to run me down for anything.
Right.
And so I think he likes, he likes working with me. I mean, he has to turn down work, and he's never going to turn down my work, because he knows that it's going to be professional, it's going to be received well, it's going to that he's going to get payment on time, it's all that stuff. So we're you talk about a book about family. I mean, we're a creative family, and
Sure.
it's nice to
Yeah.
be able to just kind of get the band back together, you know?
Oh, definitely. Having that established relationship will definitely help speed up the process, make things go a little bit smoother for you, obviously. But in addition to your creative team, you've also tapped Toku expert Brad Warner of Subaraya Productions to lend his expertise to the series. How important was it for you to bring Brad on for Suicide Jockeys? And how does yours and Brad's spirituality influence the series?
Yeah, 100% it
Because
was
I know you're
important.
both Soto Zen Buddhist monks.
Yeah, so Brad Warner is not just he did work in Japan for about a dozen years for Zubraya Productions, which is it is a company founded by the creator of Godzilla, who they are most famous. They make dozens of shows, but they're most famous for doing Ultraman. And so
Okay, sure.
Brad was a executive and a producer on Ultraman for, about a dozen years in Japan. He is also one of the most noteworthy Zen authors, the American Zen authors in the world. He wrote a great book called Hardcore Zen, which I highly recommend. It is basically for anybody looking for kind of the American Zen manual. This is it. It's means a whole lot to me. And another great book called Sit Down and Shut Up, which I love, and the art on that is kind of amazing. But he's written, I have them all here, but he's written about a dozen pretty amazing Zen books, and he's one of the, like I said, the most noteworthy and best-selling Zen authors in the country, if not in the world right now. So yeah, so Brad brought a lot to the table, and so I know Brad because of Zen. Um, uh, you know, Brad and I have practiced together for, I don't know, 15 years now, and Brad was ordained in Japan by a monk named Gudo Nishijima, who is kind of another noteworthy. He did the Soto Zen Bibles, quote unquote, is something called the Shobogenzo. It's
Okay.
the writings of Master Dogen, and Gudo Nishijima is the guy who basically did the key translation of all of it. The only reason that any of us who speak English have this is because Gudo Nishijima did it. And so Brad studied with Nishijima and then brought kind of that practice over to the United States. And Brad, among others, taught me for a long time, and it was actually Brad who ordained me as a Soto Zen Buddhist monk for a long time. And so there is this long history of students and teachers writing together in interesting ways. Um, uh, this Shobogenzo, Nishijima did the translation and wrote it, but it was done with someone named Chodo Cross, who was actually a student of Nishijima's, and
Okay.
um, and Brad and Nishijima had written together at some point, and so there was this talk for a long time: would Brad and I ever write something together? And most people thought that it was going to be a Zen text of some sort, but we ended up kind of doing this.
Okay.
And Brad is a huge movie guy, a huge comic guy, and I'm actually a huge movie guy and a huge comic guy. And so, this there are two sides to this. There is the I have for years written badass action movies in Hollywood. I mean, I've written for J.J. Abrams and Ridley Scott and Justin Lin and John Woo and on and on and on. And one of my claims to fame is I've actually written for the directors of, I think, 7 now of the 9 Fast and the Furious movies. So you
Incredible.
talk about Fast and the Furious meets Voltron, I have that covered. Brad worked for a dozen years as a executive for the company that made Ultraman, and he's much more steeped in the tokusatsu world than that even. And so he is a tokusatsu historian and expert. Brad could write the book on tokusatsu. And so while I'm making sure that this thing appeals to a hungry American action movie audience, he's making sure that tokusatsu fans have like a authentic experience. And so the other thing that's going on is, you talk about thematically, spiritually, Brad and I are actually kind of teaching Zen with this thing. And that's maybe a little intense to say. It's not about preaching or proselytizing or anything like that. But like with Zen practice, we are wrestling with life's like big, hairy existential questions here, right?
Okay.
Questions of kind of who we are and why we're here and what we're meant to be, and
Place
matters
in
of
the universe and
how we perceive time and reality and all of that stuff. And anytime you get into a time travel joint, you're wrestling with a lot of those questions. Anybody who has ever done a time travel piece in sci-fi has looked at how Zen looks at time, how past, present, and future aren't necessarily separate entities, how everything's happening at the same time and is accessible and in the here and now and all of this stuff. And so we're in a unique place to be able to do a time travel piece, you know what I'm saying? Because like, I mean, we've literally written kind of, the Zen book on this stuff. And so that's all shining through here. And so I think that this is like a really interesting, we're coming at this, from a really interesting perspective. And I don't think it's a perspective anyone's seen. And so while this will kind of feel like in a good way, like stuff you've seen, it's going to be very different and very, and pack a punch in a really interesting way, in a way that you haven't seen. So yeah, Brad was very important to the whole process, and it was exciting to kind of be able to work with him on it and do that. I mean, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it's like we usually, like, the Zen influence is very subtle, and it's just kind of, again, kind of running through the thematic undercurrent and stuff like that. But sometimes we hit it right on the head. The third issue, Denver actually has this running conversation with Dogen. Again, it's a time travel piece, and so you don't actually know how or why this thing is happening, but he sat down with Master Dogen, who again is the father of Soto Zen in Japan, from about 500 years ago. And Denver is having this, it's almost this inner dialogue that he's having, but he's having it with Dogen, and it's about everything that he's dealing with inside. Well, should I do this? Should I do this? This is a huge decision. If I do this, this happens. If I do this, this happens. I don't know how to deal with it. And Dogen kind of helps him unpack it all and kind of, sort of decode the message and solve the puzzle and everything. And so it's interesting. Sometimes we're hitting it right on the head. I mean, we put Dogen in the comic book, so I don't know. It's kind of awesome.
No, and I love how you're exploring the time travel. I know we're just getting a taste of it here, but like the billionaire investor Sunil seems to really, he's kind of an influence on that and drawing that out a little bit for the readers. And you mentioned now you've mentioned issue 2 and issue 3 already. How many issues is Suicide Jockeys, and where are you and your team currently in as far as production?
We have the first arc done.
Okay.
So the first arc is 4 issues. Okay. It's kind of where I've gone with a lot of this stuff. I mean, sometimes I push it a little further. I think the Peacekeepers, that first arc, that first story is 6 issues, I think, but usually I'm dealing with 4-issue arcs now. It breaks down like a movie. It's kind of, the first issue is the first act, the second issue is the first half of the second act, third issue, second half of the second act, and the fourth issue is the third act. But yeah, so it's the trick is to like tell a contained story that can end there if it has to, but you create this world, you create these character dynamics that would very obviously support 100 4-issue stories, and so that's what we do. We kind of wrap up the first story pretty nicely, but we set up all this stuff that's to come, and we leave you wanting more. And so, the idea, David Boer and Drew Zucker from Kanto do this really well. When they have time, they come in and they knock out a 4-issue story, and then they put it out. And they have their day jobs, they have their other lives. Zucker is an EMT on the front lines, during the whole COVID thing, and
Right.
And Boer is a very successful lawyer, and they kind of do this, and that said, they're more and more becoming comic and movie professionals because they've been so successful. But yeah, that becomes the case. It's like it's not something that is taking up 100% of your time, but you do a story and you put it out, and if people like it, then you do another story and you put it out, and yeah, so that's how we're treating this. And it's just this kind of universe that's kind of amazing, and that we'll revisit when, when is appropriate, and when it's called for. And so, I think well, we had a lot of fun with this. I mean, we just let loose. So there'll be more to come. So
Really excited for it. Like I
yeah,
said, it's really packed full with just a lot going on, and a lot of potential for areas to explore. So
yeah.
obviously what you're talking about in the future beyond the first four issues. So your last two titles to come out, now these have been during the pandemic and the fun time that we've been having across the world. The Jump and the Peacekeepers were both crowdfunded and self-published by you and with Half Evil Comics. What was it about Suicide Jockeys that made you decide to pitch the series and go a traditional publishing route? And how did it find a home at Source Point Press?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story, and you're catching, you're tuning into the story at an interesting time. So, uh, this whole crowdfunding odyssey actually started with Suicide Jockeys. So I may have told you this before, and I may have told you this on another show, maybe when we talked about one of those crowdfunded books. But so February of last year, maybe it was a little later, but kind of right as the shit started hitting the fan with all this COVID stuff.
Right.
I had two books that were with major publishers, set to be announced. They were going to come out. They were going to start coming out this time last year. And
I
one of them
remember
was
that, and then things were getting shelved with production getting shut down or the pencils down or whatever that they had going on.
yeah, well, that was what happened. And one of them, and the primary one, was Suicide Jockeys. Suicide Jockeys was with a publisher, and I went from every day I was in contact with about 3 people at the company, and we were planning this thing and figuring out, okay, when are we going to announce, and how are we going to announce, and who are we giving this exclusive to, and what are we doing with that.
Right.
And then literally overnight, then COVID hits, it's pencils down, people start getting fired, and literally overnight, I go from being in contact with 3 people every day to not having a working email address at the company. And then it takes, and then it's just pandemonium everywhere. And
Right.
so it takes a couple of months for the company to hire new people and to figure out that, well, basically anything that anyone else, anyone previously had their hands on is not going to have a feature here, and all that stuff. And so, and then there's like nowhere to take anything for a while, because it is pencils down. Comic shops are closed.
There's so much uncertainty that,
Yeah, well, and most of these companies are scheduled. I mean, like if I was going to take a book to a company right now, best case scenario, that book is being released like late 2022 or something like that. This stuff takes a long time.
Sure.
And so I have 4 or 5 books in the pipe at all times, right? And so suddenly I have all this material, and I have nowhere to take it. And
The
so
Suicide Jockeys was shelved.
it was shelved. Yeah, I mean, it was shelved. It was again, it was supposed to be released by a different company. It was supposed to come back, and so I didn't quite know what to do with that and with some of these other books. And so for about 2 years before that, there were a couple of people, Charlie Stickney, who wrote White Ash and who is now the co-publisher at Scout Comics, and he's had a lot of success on Kickstarter. And he had for years, in particular, and some other people too, had been on me to do the crowdfunding thing, to do the Kickstarter thing. This thing, there's just such an opportunity there. If you're not doing it, you're missing out. And what I came to see and realize over the course of doing, I've done 3 of them basically in the last year, is that there are people that only buy their books on Kickstarter, and there are people that only buy their books in comic shops, and there is crossover, of course, but not nearly as much as you think. They're separate audiences in a lot of ways, and I mean, the comic shop stuff, the traditional publishing way, that explains itself. But there is such a massive opportunity on Kickstarter right now, and it's a lot of people think it's just about money, and I did make some money on Kickstarter, and that was great. And you do not make money putting indie books in comic shops. You just don't. It's a labor of love. I mean, I've been lucky
Sure.
to make some money when Aberrant gets optioned as a TV series and they pay me to write the pilot or whatever. But it's a labor of love, and it costs you thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to make these comic books
Oh,
and
sure.
get
Well,
them
and
published.
especially with your campaigns, because most of the time your campaigns, work's already done, so people have already been paid. A lot of it's, you're
I
just
paid that
covering.
stuff. Yeah, I pay that
Yeah.
stuff out of pocket, and so it is amazing to be able to go to Kickstarter and recoup the budget. Recoup the money that you paid to artists, and because these guys don't work for free. You can't ask them to work for free. Like this
No.
is their job. This is what they do. So they feed their families and pay their medical insurance, and
Right.
so that's what the money's about. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's amazing to actually be able to recoup that stuff. Um, but that's fine. What Kickstarter is mostly about, it is a fan base builder. It is a way to reach an audience, and there was just a rabid, crazy, enthusiastic audience on Kickstarter, and it's been so amazing and so rewarding to be introduced to that. And so that is the real lure of Kickstarter. And so there's such an opportunity there now that if you, as a creator, if you're not servicing both audiences, meaning the Kickstarter audience and the comic shop audience, then you're doing yourself and you're doing your book a disservice. And so I have kind of committed to moving forward to servicing both audiences, releasing The Jump and releasing Peacekeepers there on Kickstarter, it was about not there not being traditional publishing opportunities, but then it was about, oh my God, there's something amazing going on here. I need to dive in with both feet. Um, and so that explains that decision. All that said is these worlds are not exclusive anymore. It used to be that if you went to Kickstarter, you couldn't do the traditional publishing route. That's not the case anymore. Both The Jump and Peacekeepers will eventually find a comic shop, and when they do find the comic shop, it'll have different covers, it'll have different content, it'll be organized differently, it'll be a new experience. So people who tuned into it on Kickstarter will get something new and get something interesting out of it. But then the comic shop audience, it's going to be completely new to them, and it'll be awesome. And so down the line, once those kind of Kickstarter lives play out, we'll go to traditional comic shops, and that's what Charlie Stickney did with White Ash. Charlie Stickney, he did 5 White Ash Kickstarters, and then took it to Scout Comics, and Scout Comics brought it to comic shops, and it had another really successful run in comic shops, and they loved it so much that they then made him co-publishers. So that shows you how that goes. So with Suicide Jockeys, I mean, it was it was after I'd already gone the traditional publishing route with it. And so after it kind of went into turnaround, after it came back to me, I had a lot of suitors. There were a
Okay.
couple of people who were immediately interested. You can only do like 3 or 4 Kickstarters a year. You can't do the next one until the previous one is fulfilled. You know what I'm saying? You
Right.
can't,
Right.
and it is so much work. It's almost like making a movie or something. Getting one of these
Sure.
things off the ground, getting them ready for printing, and the fulfillment is a nightmare. It's the one thing I still hate. And so there wasn't a Kickstarter spot for Suicide Jockeys, and there was such an interest. And so SourcePoint, came calling, and we had been looking to do something together for a really long time.
Okay.
Um, I for various reasons was moving on from Action Lab as my kind of comic home, and I was looking for a new place to lay my head. I knew SourcePoint. We had I know Frank Gogol and some of their other creators, and the creators have always kind of gushed about them and spoke highly of them, and I know SourcePoint from cons and all that, and I
Sure.
just great company, and they're really doing some interesting stuff. So I'd always wanted to do something with them. I gave them the book, they loved the book, and they came to me with just a really interesting, enthusiastic proposal. And so it was an easy decision to say yes, and then it was just about kind of figuring out how to schedule it. And so back to my kind of prime summer slot, both Aberrant and BANJAX were released, kind of right in the middle of the summer when people are kind of, excited for new comics, and cons are going crazy and stuff like that. So yeah, so we're coming out in August, and hit previews in June, which is a sweet spot. And so yeah, we're back to comic shops. I mean, I've been out of comic shops for a year, so
Isn't that
I'm
crazy? Hey, and yeah, for Suicide Jockeys, number one, as you see here, we got both covers. Your variant is a movie poster homage for Roadhouse.
Courthouse. Yeah.
And you brought on your Ringo Award nominated duo, Fabio Alves and Edson Ferreira, from your other two titles, BANJAX and The Jump. Are you planning more 80s nods or homages with upcoming variants? And will the variants continue to be by Fabio and Edson?
Yeah. So I'm, I am, I don't know if it's famous or infamous for my variants at this point. I
Oh,
obviously,
famous. It's not. No one's getting tired of them, right?
yeah. I mean, there's definitely obviously, I mean, we set the bar pretty high, with ABERRANT right off the bat, coming in with our, our Coming to America variant and our Karate Kid variant and all of that stuff, and then.
Right.
Then we continued it with BANJAX, with our Gremlins variant, which was very popular, our Rocky IV variant, and then of course we got together with Pop Cult HQ and really kind of knocked two out of the park. We did a Weekend at Bernie's variant for ABERRANT. We did a Iron Man Demon in a Bottle variant for BANJAX, which was awesome. And so people love them, and people are excited about them, and people like to write about them. And so it's a formula that works, and they tickle me, and it's appropriate for a book, an action book that's full of references. And so we have our variants kind of pay homage to the movies that we loved, and kind of gave birth and inspiration to this book. And so yeah, issue 1 is the Roadhouse variant that you see in the back, and if you bring up the original Roadhouse poster, you'll see that it's a pretty dead on balls homage. So yeah, we do all of the primary variants are done by Fabio and Edson. Again, like you said, they were nominated for Ringo Awards, Fabio specifically for Best Cover Artist last year. And so it's a great duo, and they do great work, and they do fast work when I need it. And so, and again, like, it's people that I just keep working. I have them in house now, and so I'm never letting them go if I can help it. But
well, and Davi captures them real well too. Like I said, I mentioned speaking with him on Instagram.
Yeah.
You knew it was Lou Ferrigno and it was Eric Estrada. He's really coming around, man. I every time he puts something else out, I just keep getting more impressed. So
yeah, he's great. But yeah, so the issue 2 variant, the primary variant is a bullet homage.
okay.
Yeah, and we found an old bullet poster that's just gorgeous. And so that's not 80s, that goes a little further back, but it's great. And then the issue 3 cover, which we just completed, is a Top Gun homage. Actually the second Top Gun variant homage that I've done. We did a Top Gun Playing with the Boys volleyball scene
Yeah, the
homage,
volleyball, right.
and ABERRANT. This is more action oriented, and so we did that. And then we haven't done the issue 4 variant yet. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think I need to hit one of those Bayverse films. So we'll see, but I'm thinking of it. But yeah, the variants are going to get kind of crazy, because it's one of the really cool things that SourcePoint does is they have a retailer exclusive variant program.
Yeah, I saw you mention about that on social media, reaching out to prospective retailers who are interested.
Yeah, and if there are retailers, watching, listening right now, there may be a spot or 2 left in it. I don't know at this point. They tend to fill up quickly, but if you're interested, inquire. And so yeah, I think they take 10 retailers per book, and they offer them like a shop exclusive variant. And so it is a cover that only that shop has and sells. And they get crazy with it. I mean, you get metal versions, and you get foil versions, and it ends up being this like amazing package for the shop.
And it's possible like some of those could wind up in one of their mystery boxes. They have like monthly boxes, a subscription or
yeah,
ones where you get random ones thrown in, and definitely exclusive variants like that.
Yeah. SourcePoint does a really good job on this stuff. So yeah, those are in progress now, where it's, you have so each variant, I mean, a lot of these shops, they do a lot of this variant stuff, and so they have artists that they love and know, and they go after really high profile artists, and so sometimes it's just high profile artist comes in and takes a look at the book and is inspired and does his or her own variant that kind of knocks you back in your ass.
Right.
Sometimes the shop comes in and says, hey, I want to work with Rylend, and I want to plan it out with Rylend, and I want to, with Rylend, pick the artist. And so long-winded way of saying that there will be, so we have our regular cover, we have our standard variant, but then there will be 10 extra issue one
Store exclusives.
store exclusive, yeah, that are
Okay.
out there, and will be very limited and very highly sought after. And
And is that only being done with the first issue? I know typically issue ones, sell better with variants like that, and or you can
yeah,
continue on.
well, I mean, that's where the big splash is made, but a retailer can sign on for one issue, or they can sign on for the whole run. And so there are
Okay.
retailers who will do a specific shop variant for each issue. And so there probably won't be 12 covers for issue 4 like there will be for issue 1. But yeah, there are going to be 12 variants on this, and they're going to be awesome. And and then those variants will have metal variants and foil variants, and it's going to be
Right.
cool. I mean, it's going to be cool. And then of course, the con variants will come later.
Sure.
When there's a big con, we'll have our
In due
we'll
time.
figure out what our version of the Gremlins cover.
And
I mean,
you know what?
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say all of those big aberrant BANJAX covers came, usually at a big con, like it was San Diego Comic Con, or it was Baltimore Comic Con, the Ringo Awards,
Right. Right.
something like that. So when there's a special occasion, we'll parade her back out and hit you in the mouth with something kind of awesome. So
Definitely. And another thing that's great about SourcePoint Press is they're one of the few publishers you can buy directly from their website.
yeah,
So, once this is available, or once the variant's available, you can go to SourcePoint Press's website and purchase directly from them. But also, definitely want to get your pre-orders in now for issue 1 for Suicide Jockeys. I'm backwards here. So there we go. The main cover here by the creative team that does the interiors, Davi Leon Deus and Ewan Joko Triano, and over here Fabio Alves and Edson Ferreira, both issue 1s. They come out August 25th. Hit up your local comic shop, your favorite online retailer, or sourcepointpress.com and get your pre-orders in now. Great series on the way, man. I'm so excited for this, and thanks so much, Ryan, for taking the time to tell us about your new project, man. People are gonna be blown away.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. As always,
Oh,
and thanks for
anytime.
listening, guys. Yeah.